Okay guys, this is lecture video B, so we're going to pick up right where we left off with A, the lymphoid tissues. Alright, so the predominant type of tissue that is in these lymphatic tissues is going to be reticular, and it's, remember, that loose connective. Hopefully this image is familiar to you, but they're specialized cells, very thin reticular fibers. They form the net or the webs that trap pathogens. Now, typically, we call lymphatic reticular tissue lymphoid tissue, and this is found in all your lymphoid organs, but it also can just be independent clusters found throughout the body. So lymphoid tissue is in the organs, and yes, it does make up lymphatic organs, but it can also just be out on its own as well. Okay. All right, let's see if we can flip it. There we go. All right, so now let's look at the lymphoid cells. Lymphoid organs are going to have leukocytes. Of course, we're going to have those macrophages. Remember, they're the mature monocytes, very active phagocytes. You're going to engulf and eat stuff that shouldn't be there. And then you have your B and T lymphocytes. These are the agranulocytes with very diverse immune functions. We kind of briefly got into that. We're going to get in that to a lot in this chapter. And then you have the dendritic cells, which have those spiny processes that kind of look like the dendrites on neurons. They come from the bone marrow, but they originate in other places and other connective tissue. And then you have the reticular cells, which are probably the abundant or the most abundant in organs like your spleen and lymph nodes. And those cells are going to make that reticular fibers, which are made of that protein collagen. All right, so these are some of your leukocytes. All right, and this is kind of, again, that picture of that reticular tissue, which is what the lymphoid tissues are made of. All right. Let's talk about MALT. This is mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, or we call it MALT. This is a loosely organized cluster of tissue. It's going to protect your mucous membranes. Now let's go back and make sure from 201. Mucous membranes are membranes that line any opening to the outside. So digestive, respiratory, urinary, reproductive. All right, all of those have openings to the outside, which means they're exposed to a lot of pathogens. Now, MALT protects your oral cavity, it protects the nasal cavities. It's also scattered throughout your GI tract, your respiratory, your urinary, your reproductive. A lot of the MALT is going to have B and T cells that lack a tissue capsule. So a lot of these B and T cells are going to make up the MALT. Now, specialized MALT is found in 3 areas of your GI tract. Your tonsils, located in the oral nasal cavities, Peyer's patches, which is in the last part of your small intestine called the ileum. You're going to have a really special area of lymphoid nodules, and your appendix, which protrudes from the large intestine. So those are 3 places just in your GI tract that have a very special type of MALT. Okay. All right, let's look at our 3 main types of tonsils. You have pharyngeal tonsils. So you have probably, that's going to be these right here, very close to your ears, your ear cavity, or the inner ear. And you probably heard people call these adenoids. A lot of kids that have tubes in their ears, if they've already had a set and they're going in for the 2nd or 3rd set, a lot of times surgeons will remove the adenoids, and that's what they're taking is the pharyngeal type of tonsil. And that's because, again, it's just so bogged with bacteria that it's causing the body more harm than good. And it's right there near that nasopharynx. And then you have the palatine tonsils, which are in your right here, the very back, postlateral oral cavity, and then you have the linguinal tonsil, which are right here at the base of the tongue. Okay, the tonsils have these indents, which are called tonsillar crypts. In the tonsillar crypts, that's where the bacteria and debris is trapped. The location of your tonsils is going to put them in direct contact with a lot of pathogens. As a result, a lot of times they become inflamed, and we call this tonsillitis. Some of you probably had tonsillitis. If you've had several cases of tonsillitis, that's when they're going to look at removing the tonsils. Okay, Peyer's patches. Those are the ones that are also exposed to a lot of potential pathogens because of location. This is in your intestines. We eat a lot of foods. Face it, foods come from the outside. So if they're coming from the outside, they are going to have pathogens coming in. But this does allow them to defend against any bacteria that might have escaped from the large intestine. So that's why we have those Peyer patches. And then, of course, you have the appendix, which is blind-ended. It's kind of a worm-like shaped tube that comes out right here. There's your appendix. Kind of comes out from that large intestine. It again defends the body from bacteria in the large intestine, especially those that could be pathogenic. All right, so all this is for protection, trying to protect the body. Okay, lymph nodes. Talk about lymph nodes. Little small bean-shaped clusters of lymphatic tissue, and they're located all along the vesicle system throughout the body. They have an external capsule that's a network of reticular fibers filled with macrophages, lymphocytes, and dendritic cells. The node of the lymph node is divided into two regions, the outer cortex and the inner medulla. Probably not the first time you've heard of that. You have these follicles. The cortex has these follicles which are divided by extensions of the capsule called trabeculae. So if you look, right here's the cortex, kind of outlining this for you. The medulla is going to be the inner part. Okay, here are the follicles right there, lymphatic follicles, and these are the trabeculae that divide the follicles. Okay, now between the cortex and medulla, there's a zone that is mainly T cells. The medulla has fewer leukocytes than the cortex, but it does have some B cells. The lymph flows into the node through an afferent lymphatic vessels. Right here, these afferent lymphatic vessels, they're bringing the lymph, which is the fluid, into the node. Okay, then it percolates through all that reticular network where the pathogens basically become trapped in the net. Okay, the trapped pathogens then are going to come in contact with leukocytes and dendritic cells, which are going to eliminate those threats, basically going to engulf them, macrophage them, kill them, whatever they have to do. And then once the lymph has been cleaned of pathogens, it's going to drain out the efferent lymphatic vessel on the other side of the node at the hilum. This right here is called the hilum. It's a little indentation. Your kidney has a hilum too. It's just where things are going to come out. So that's basically what happens. The lymph, which is the fluid, comes into the node. It percolates through the node where it's effectively trapped. The pathogens are trapped. And then the clean lymph is going to drain out while the pathogens are going to stay in that lymph node while the lymph node takes care of them. Okay, and is basically going to eliminate those. So that is how the lymph nodes work. They're scattered all over the body throughout the lymphatic vessel system. Now, they trap about 90% of pathogens in the lymph fluid. They prevent these pathogens from getting into the blood where they easily could spread all over the body. You do have some specific clusters of lymph nodes. You have the axillary, of course, are going to be under the armpit. You have the cervical, which of course are in your neck. Inguinal, which are going to be right here at that inguinal region. And the mesenteric, which are going to be in your abdominal cavity. So those are some specific clusters of lymph nodes. All right, we're going to look at the spleen, largest lymphoid organ in the body. It's on the upper left upper quadrant of the abdominal pelvic cavity. It's kind of a purplish brown color. It's like the size of a bar of soap. There is an internal network of reticular fibers made of that reticular cell tissue. But there's two distinct histological regions that are found there. You have red pulp and you have white pulp. Red pulp has macrophages that destroy old red blood cells. Remember, we learned that the spleen's the graveyard for red blood cells when they die. So that's what red pulp does. But the white pulp is the lymphatic tissue, and that filters pathogens from the blood, and that's where you find the leukocytes as well as the dendritic cells. All right, thymus. We've already been introduced to the thymus before. Small organ, 2 lobes in the mediastinum. It does not trap pathogens. Y'all see that? Does not trap them. It secretes hormones that enable it to carry out its primary function, which is generating functional T cells that are capable of protecting the body. So this releases hormones. We know that. We studied this organ during the endocrine system. It does not trap pathogens, but it does produce very functional T cells that protect our body and are very important immune cells. It's very active and large in infants and children, but it reaches its maximum size about 12 to 14, and then after that it begins to atrophy, which means it shrinks. It's basically replaced with fat as the T cell production declines. By the time you're around 65, T cell production falls to like 2% of what it was when you were a baby. The adult thymus basically has thymic lobules, which kind of look like lumps on the surface of the thymus. So it's more active in children, which again, you know, by the time you reach an adulthood, we kind of look at our immune system as pretty well built. And that's part of that, and that's part of the reason why that thymus atrophies with age. Okay, we're going to stop here. We will pick back up as we jump into the immune system in the next video.